Hello, guys, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Vijeta, and today we shall be continuing with what we left. How Demetrius and Lysander are both in love with Helena because of that love juice, which Puck accidentally put or sprayed in both of their eyes, and now Hermia is infuriated. And yeah, so now let us go further. Now, when Titania woke up, she sees Bottom, whose head is transformed into an ass, and Titania starts loving him. Okay, so it's kind of funny. To mend everything, Puck again spreads the love potion in their eyes, and by morning, everything is well. Demetrius now loves Helena, and Lysander loves Hermia. The group is married, and the lovers go to bed. Robin Goodfellow is the other name of Puck, and it's an important question for your UGC net. Famous quotes from A Midsummer's Night Dream. Love looks not with the eyes, but with the mind, and therefore is winged Cupid painted blind. The lunatic, the lover, and the poet are of imagination all compact. Lovers are madmen, and they have such seething brains, such shaping fantasies that apprehend more than cool reason ever comprehends. I think there's something missing in the quote, but it goes like this. What angel wakes me from my flowered bed? Now we come to the life and death of King John, written in 1596. King John is a history play of Shakespeare written in about 1596, and it is about the reign of King John, who reigned from 1199 to 1216. He was the son of Henry II of England. And now the characters. King John is the King of England, Eleanor, widow of Henry II and mother of John, Prince Henry, son of John, Henry III, Blanche of Castile, John's niece. The main theme of the play is the conflict between his younger brother and a bastard for the throne. That is the main theme of this play. And this is more or less that you need to know. Now we come to The Merchant of Venice, a very well known play of Shakespeare, written in 1596. It is a comedy by Shakespeare, and it is best known for Shylock and the famous Hath not a Jew eyes speech, and Portia's speech, The Quality of Mercy. Bassanio, a young Venetian, wishes to woo the beautiful and wealthy heiress, Portia of Belmont. Now he needed 3,000 ducats for expenditure in his marriage. Bassanio asks help from his friend Antonio, who takes him to Shylock, a moneylender, by telling Bassanio that he is cashless and his ships are busy at sea, so he will cover the bond asked by Shylock. Shylock was compelled to charge interest at lower rates because Antonio used to give loan interest free. A bond was signed between Antonio and Shylock for an interest free loan, and if Antonio doesn't pay at the specified date, Shylock will take a pound of Antonio's flesh. Quite a horrid deal, I suppose. Along with money, Bassanio, along with his tactless friend Gratiano or Gratiano, leaves for Belmont. In Belmont, Portia is busy with suitors because, according to her father's wish, whoever will choose the one from the three caskets will marry Portia. Now, there are three types of caskets made of gold, silver, and lead. Bassanio chooses the lead casket, which proclaims, Who chooseth me must give and hazard all he hath. Portia succeeds to marry Bassanio because he chose the one, the lead one. At Venice, Antonio's ships are reported lost and he couldn't repay the bond. Gratiano marries Nerissa. Shylock's daughter, Jessica, escapes with Antonio's friend, Lorenzo. After the bond expires, Shylock refuses to take 600 ducats in the court of the Duke of Venice, sent by Portia to save the life of her husband. Portia disguises as Balthazar, a young male, doctor of the law. Nerissa also disguises as a man and becomes Balthazar's clerk. We have the appearance of Balthazar a lot. Even, I told you, even in Romeo and Juliet. I think Shakespeare really liked this character. The moment comes to cut Antonio's flesh. Portia announces the bond that is about only the flesh and not even a drop of blood, and he must cut precisely 1 pound of flesh, no more or no less. If Shylock fails to do this, his lands and goods will be forfeited, warned Portia. So she's clever, you see. Now, ultimately, Shylock becomes ready to take that double amount, but Portia is now refusing it. She's like, no. So ultimately, Antonio's ships were recovered, and Shylock was excused by the Duke, and he converts to Christianity, and half of his property was given to Lorenzo and Jessica. So the thing is, this play is often criticized for being anti Semitic, and the treatment of Shylock and the treatment of Jewish people in general in plays, especially in Shakespeare's plays where Jewish people were shown to be this money loving people. So, yeah, this theme is prevalent here. Important quotes: "The villainy you teach me, I will execute, and it shall go hard, but I will better the instruction," by Shylock. Now we come to this Henry IV, Part 1, written in 1596 or 97. It is a history play of Shakespeare, believed to have been written in 1597. It is the second play in Shakespearean tetralogy, dealing with the reigns of Richard II, Henry IV, 2 plays, that is Part 1 and Part 2, and Henry V. Major tetralogy of Shakespeare, Henry IV, Part 1, and Part 2, Henry V, and Richard II. These are the major plays of the tetralogy. Minor tetralogy of Shakespeare, Henry IV, Henry VI, Part 1, Part 2, and Part 3, and Richard III. Just keep that in mind. They might ask this. Now, Henry IV, Part 1, depicts the span of history which begins with Hotspur's battle at Hamilton in Northumberland against the Douglas, late in 1402, and ends with the defeat of the rebels at Shrewsbury in the middle of 1403. Important characters: King Henry IV, King of England; Henry, Prince of Wales, eldest son of Henry IV, named Hal or Harry; Sir John Falstaff, a knight who befriends Hal; John of Lancaster, King's second son; Henry Percy, also called Hotspur. Henry IV, Part 2, written in 1597, or you can say a time span between 96 to 99. And it is seen as the continuation of Part 1. Important characters: King Henry IV, Prince Hal, Prince John of Lancaster, Henry's son; Duke of Gloucester or Gloucester, Henry's son; Duke of Clarence, Henry's son; Earl of Northumberland, Sir John Falstaff. Henry IV, Part 2, again. You see, I think I did this slide already. Pardon me. Now we come to a play that actually I did in my high school, and it's a well-known play. It's Much Ado About Nothing, written in 1598, and important characters are Don Pedro, Prince of Aragon; Benedict, a lord and soldier from Padua, companion of Don Pedro; Don John, brother of Don Pedro, the bastard prince; Claudio of Florence, a count companion of Don Pedro, friend of Benedict; Leonato, Hero's father and governor of Messina; Balthazar, again, attendant of Don Pedro and singer; Hero, daughter of Leonato; Beatrice, niece of Leonato; Margaret, waiting gentlewoman on Hero; Ursula, waiting gentleman of Beatrice. The plot: is that it is a comedy by Shakespeare written in, I told you, 1598. Leonardo was living in the Italian town of Messina. Leonardo shares his house with his daughter Hero, his niece Beatrice, and his brother Antonio. Leonardo's friends who are returning from a war are welcomed by him. They are Don Pedro, a prince, Claudio, a well respected young nobleman, and Benedict, a clever man. Illegitimate brother of Don Pedro, Don John, is also the part of the crowd, and he always creates troubles for others. Claudio falls in love with Hero while Benedict and Beatrice insult each other. To pass the time and to make Beatrice and Benedict fall in love, they decide to play a game. They get success in making Benedict and Beatrice fall in love. Don John decides to disrupt everybody's happiness. He asks his companion, Borachio, to make love to Margaret, who is Hero's serving woman. He makes Claudio believe that Hero is unfaithful to him by making him see that there is a woman who is on her window talking to a man, and Claudio somehow believes that it is Hero. So it kind of shows the nature of Claudio, which is very fickle. And yeah, the night watchman overhears Borachio's bragging about his crime. The local police arrests Borachio and Conrad, who are Don John's followers. Now, Hero's family members pretend that she is dead, but when the truth appears about her being innocent, Claudio grieves for her. Now he is grieving. Leonardo tells Claudio that as a punishment, he should tell everyone in the city about how innocent Hero was. Leonardo wanted to marry Claudio to his niece, a girl much looking like Hero. But at the end, it is revealed that the girl appeared to be Hero in the final scene. Hero was not dead. She was very much alive. She just swooned at the marriage where Claudio insulted her. Yeah. At the end of the play, both the lovers were married, that is, Claudio to Hero and Benedict to Beatrice. Beatrice tells Benedict, the princess Jester, a very dull fool. And there is a quote that I just remember it still. Like I read this play in class 8, and I don't know why, but I still remember this line where Beatrice goes to Benedict and like they are both in love, and Beatrice asks Benedict that she says to Benedict, kill Claudio. That's like one statement. And Benedict says, ha, not for the whole wide world. It was such a important piece of dialogue. I don't know why. I just loved that dialogue. It was short, it was impactful, and it was precise, but it was something that I mean I can't forget till this day. Till to this date, I can't forget that dialogue. So yeah, I wanted to share this. And if you have been present till here, thank you for listening. King Henry V, written in 1599. It is the last play in the tetralogy of Shakespeare, preceded by Richard II, Henry IV Part 1, and Henry IV Part 2. It tells the story of King Henry V, focusing on the events immediately before and after the Battle of Agincourt, 1415, during the 100 Years' War. Main characters are King Henry V, King of England, Duke of Gloucester, Henry's brother, Duke of Clarence, Henry's brother, Duke of Exeter, Henry's uncle, Duke of York, Henry's cousin. Julius Caesar, a very important play and a very well-known play by Shakespeare, written in 1599, and the source of the play is Thomas North's translation of Plutarch's Lives, a very important question. It is based on the true events from Roman history, which also includes Coriolanus and Antony and Cleopatra. The play opens with Flavius and Marcellus. The play opens with the commoners of Rome celebrating Caesar's triumphant return from defeating Pompey's sons at the Battle of Munda. Caesar was 1 year deaf, he had epilepsy. Now, there is a discussion between Brutus and Cassius about the killing of Caesar, because they think that Caesar is power hungry, and not all of them think that, only Brutus thinks that. So, Brutus joins the conspiracy to prevent Caesar from doing anything against the people of Rome. Antony asked him for coronation 3 times, but all the times he refused. Brutus compares Caesar to a serpent egg. Caesar's assassination is one of the most famous scenes of the play, and it occurs in the Act 3, Scene 1. Remember that? When Caesar comes in the Senate, the conspirators come closer by means of a petition brought by Metellus Sember, pleading on behalf of his brother who is banished. As Caesar rejects the petition, Casca grazes Caesar in the back of his neck, followed by other conspirators, and Brutus was the last to stab him. And I want to tell you there's this dialogue, Envious Casca, which is also the name of a novel, very wonderful novel written by Georgette Hare. And yeah, it's a mystery novel. It's the title is taken from here. And at this point, Caesar utters the famous line, "Et tu, Brute." You too, Brutus. It's very important, and it was filled with this kind of, you know, sorrow for such a friend, for such a celebrated friend who actually stabs him in the back, quite literally, seems. The conspirators make clear that they committed this act for Rome, not for their own purpose. The crowd is on Brutus's side. They listen their much quoted "Friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears" by Mark Antony. He calls the conspirators as honorable men. Antony reads Caesar's will about how he was sympathetic to Romans and proved Brutus as wrong. Because the will of Caesar stated that every man of Rome will get 75 drachmas as well as land. Brutus and Cassius prepare a war against Mark Antony and Caesar's adopted son Octavius. That night, Caesar's ghost appears warning him of defeat. Cassius is killed by his servant Pindarus. Brutus loses the battle and commits suicide by running on his own sword. The play ends with a tribute to Brutus by Antony, who proclaims Brutus as the noblest Roman of them all, because he was the only conspirator who acted in his mind for the good of Rome. After Caesar, triumvirs, Antony, Octavius, and Lepidus ruled Rome, they all appear in Antony and Cleopatra. Another play. Shakespeare's Julius Caesar and the Irony of History is a book by Myron Taylor. They can ask you. Now we come to the important quotes. Friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears. And yeah, I come to bury Caesar, not to praise him, by Mark Antony, Act 3, Scene 1. A serpent egg which hatches would, as his kind, grow mischievous and kill him in the shell, by Brutus about Caesar. Et tu, Brute, and you, Brutus, or you too, Brutus, the fallen Caesar to Brutus. The noblest Roman of them all, by Mark Antony to Brutus. Now let it work mischief, thou art a fool. Take thou what cause thou wit. Soliliki by Mark Antony after his famous speech. Cowards die many times before their deaths. The valiant never taste of death but once. The evil that men do lives after them. The good is oft interred with their bones. So, yeah, now I will stop here. We will begin with As You Like It in the next lecture. I hope you like this video. Please like it, share, subscribe to my channel, comment, and I will meet you all in the next video. Thank you.